Hello, 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 everybody. Welcome back to the Susie Lynn McMahon Virtual Book Club. You guys, happy 2026. This means we have been doing this virtual book club for 6 years, this coming up April. That's crazy, isn't it? And I wanted to welcome back Francine, our group expert, and also welcome back, because you joined us a long time ago, our featured author, Grace Walls. How are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm so glad to be back. And I know a new year. I can't believe y'all have been doing it for 6 years now. That's quite an accomplishment.
Yeah, it's morphed and changed and moved since back in those COVID days. But I love the community that we've built, and I love having the opportunity to talk to an author in person. So many of the traditional book clubs don't get to do this, and I love promoting you, and I love introducing you to readers, and the writer community has stayed very active in the book club as well. But today I wanted to remind everybody the book that we are going to discuss without spoilers is your second, right?
Yes.
Second novel, Good Hair Days. I love the cover. It's so fun. I think I'm having a good hair day. How about you, Francine and Grace? Yeah, everybody.
I think
Yes,
we're doing good.
I'm just
Yeah.
done. So yeah, I'm really happy today.
Uh, we got to do our hair when we get on Zoom, right? Anyway, I'm going to read Grace's bio, and then I'm going to start out with Francine asking the first question. We'll be talking for about 30 to 40 minutes today, so hang in there and sit back and enjoy it. Um, Grace, is it Helena or Helena?
It's Helena.
Okay.
Mhm.
Grace Helena Walz received a master's degree in social work from the University of Houston and has worked with children in foster care as a medical social worker and in the mental health capacity. She currently resides outside of Atlanta, Georgia, with her husband and two young children. She writes women's fiction in the moments between sticking band-aids on, scraped knees, and coordinating pint size, sorry, I need stronger glasses, social engagements. So welcome to back to the book club and tell me, oh, I'm gonna have Francine ask the first question, so I'll stop there. You go, girl.
Thank you, Susie. Thank you, Grace, for coming back to our book club and um, giving us time to speak about your book. My first question is where did the idea come from for this book? Because first of all, I love the name. Went to a hairstylist for like 15 years, and we said that all the time. So where did the idea come from for this book?
Yeah, so it's funny that you say that that's something your hairstylist used to say because the idea for this book really did come from my own visit to the hair salon. So I was going to a place that was just small and run by, it wasn't one of those big commercial salons. It was run by two friends. And one of the first few times I was there, I was struck by kind of how they spoke to one another. They were so candid. They were so just like they talked about all sorts of things. I think I was a little bit older than them. They were younger. And it was just, it struck me kind of how freely they were, how comfortable they were being themselves and speaking openly and freely, and kind of what a sacred space it had become because they didn't really know me from anybody else. I was a complete stranger to them. I wasn't like a close friend. And so I had this moment where I kind of thought, wow, they really are more like sisters, the way they kind of interact. They kind of didn't have to explain everything. They knew they could anticipate each other's needs and desires. And I had one of those moments where I was like, oh, this is a book. This relationship between these two sisters in a hair salon. What is that space like? What is it like for that to be a family-run business? And then even more so, this space that's very female-centric, this space that is, there's rituals and routines around it, and it brings all sorts of people in. And then, kind of going a step beyond that, then it spread out to this more of a community feel. And so, how does that serve a purpose in the larger community? And then, what happens when things start to go wrong?
Well, I have to say, you did it beautifully. I mean, Page Turner. And for those of us, I'm a lot older than you. And for those of us that grew up going to the hair salon with their mother, that was a sacred space. It
Mhm.
still is a sacred space for me today. I mean, I went to one hairdresser for ever. And it's amazing what you talk about that you might not talk about with somebody else. So bravo.
I'm so glad. I'm so glad you enjoyed it. This was a book where I kind of editorially, I was pushed to kind of go further with certain things. And, those of you who have read the book, even if you just read the author's note, you know that we kind of wade into some kind of heavier themes and some more
Mhm.
difficult things that are happening between the women in the family. And it was one that I wanted to do really carefully because I wanted to be, thoughtful with those topics. But then I also wanted there to be a lot of fun and a lot of, between the women in the family for there to be those joyful moments that to kind of achieve that balancing act of how do we make a book that, like Karen White gave me the loveliest blurb, and she said it's as heartwarming as it is heartbreaking. And that was kind of my goal in going in of how do we strike this balance.
Because they're well said, it's heartbreaking, heartwarming, and it's heavy, sad, funny. There, it takes a great author to do that so well, like you did, I think, because I cried a lot in that book.
Well, thank you. I don't like to say I'm glad you cried, but those are the feelings, right? Like I cried so much when I wrote parts of this book, and I poured a lot of emotions into it, and I'm glad that it landed.
It did. It landed. So yeah. So Susie, I'll let you talk for a little bit now.
No worries, no worries. One of the things that's coming through my mind right now, I didn't even really think about it as much when I was reading the book until you described your origin story. And I am back in the hair salon that my mom went to, my brother went to, I went to, and I feel like everybody in our neighborhood, her name was Sandy, and she was like a family figure when I was growing up. And that's in Atlanta, in the Chamblee area. And I find that if you do have that consistency of someone, that it does become almost like a family. They become like a family member. Um, when I was reading this, I loved the um, the challenge of how your lead character was from Atlanta, had left the small town and the back and the forth. Did you go through something like that yourself? Because it kind of seems like that character just was really having personal struggles about what she should be doing in life, but versus, being back at the family house and things like that.
Yeah, that's a great question. I do think like I have gone through similar, not the exact same situation. So I live now back where I grew up. So it's not a small town, it's, suburban Atlanta. So it's not, even though there are communities and you get to know folks, and especially if you stay a lot in your local community, it can sometimes feel like a small town because you feel like you know everyone. But it's not quite the same. But I have, I left state to go to college. So I went to College of Charleston in Charleston, South Carolina. And then I left there to go to Houston, Texas, because I did I signed up for a volunteer year. I ended up doing 2 years. And then from there, I met my husband, we got married, and then we moved to Seattle. And for me, during a lot of that time, after I was really once I was to my kind of mid to later 20s, I had a big pull of like, I want to come back. I want to be, back close to home. And less so for me personally was it the family expectations, because my parents have always been very just openly supportive of kind of, we're going to support what you want to do if it's something that's making you happy and is fulfilling and obviously not harmful to you or other people. Um, but, so I didn't really feel the expectations in that way, but I did feel this pull to home. And so as I think just a person and a writer, I also just have an interest in these concepts of home and what makes something home. And is it, for some people, it might be the place where they had, most of their growing up happen. And then for other people, it's really what they create in their life that, they move somewhere else. And that's where, they build this, like my older sister. I'm a middle child, but I'm a sister, which I think writing this story and not having been a sister would have been tricky. The book is dedicated to my sister as well, but my sister lives in Charlotte, and she has this life that she's built there. She went to college there and she knows everybody there. And so for her, that is 100% home. So I think I'm personally really interested in the concept of home and what about our own experiences and our own personalities define what makes home for us.
Mhm. Wonderful, wonderful. I love reading books of where I have been or where I can imagine it being. And I think that that brings the development of a place as an actual character is what I'm trying to say. I think Pat Conroy was fantastic with that, with all the descriptive novels around the Beaufort Low Country. I think that's why probably two-thirds of the population live here is because we read his books and fell in love with the landscape. So it's neat when the concept of home is a character because we can all relate to it, right?
Yeah.
Francine, what's next?
Okay, which character was the most difficult for you to write and why?
That's a great question. So actually the character that was the most difficult was Georgia, the main character.
Oh yeah.
Um, so I really had, and that was where I did a lot of my work editorially, because actually in the first draft that I sent to my editor, she was like, I see what you're trying to get at, but she was like, there's a lot of Georgia that's coming off as really unlikable at the beginning of the book, in the early draft that I sent in. And so for me, going in, I really wanted to make all of these women very realistic in the sense of being imperfect. So that was something that I wanted to get at. I wanted people who had good intentions and a good heart, but like all of us who make mistakes. And, this idea that, sometimes we do things and we think we're doing the right thing because
Right.
we think that, it's going to have the best outcome. And then it's not until later that we realize, oh shoot, I shouldn't have done that, or like that wasn't the best choice. So with Georgia, I had to do a lot of molding her so that the readers would be able to connect with her and not think, well, why is she off doing all this stuff when, obviously she should just go home and she should just, this, that, and the other. That I had to really work hard to blend in enough of the family history and what her relationship with her late mother meant, in order to build out her motivations of kind of why is she fibbing about certain things and why is she trying to live up to these expectations? Because to many people, they would just turn around and be like, nope, this is not for me. But this is not a family where you do things like that. In this family where these women come from, there is this long legacy of, following family traditions and out of love too, not out of, only expectation. So Georgia was one that she was the most difficult for me to write.
Well, again, you nailed her. I
Thank you.
didn't not like her, but I was rooting for her the whole time. For those of us that have made mistakes along the way, and I think most of us have,
Yeah.
and ask forgiveness and we learn from them. And you're rooting for her. Like then when you find out what she did in college with the boyfriend, and again, I don't want to say anything about this book because I want everybody to read it and not know anything. I love reading a book that I don't know how it's going to end or what's going to happen. But when you find out what she's gone through, it's just brilliant, Grace. It really is.
I'm so glad. I'm so glad. Thank you, Francine.
It's
Yeah.
wonderful. I have a frog in my throat for some reason today. Maybe just yelling at the Super Bowl game last night. No, not really. I was like, oh, would somebody just win? No, I'm just kidding. Anyway, um, I wanted to ask you the fact that you live in the Southeast, and do you find that all of your books are going to have this? I'm coming back to the sense of place. Are all of your books going to be featured in this area, or in your works that you may or may not have already done? Are you going outside of the country? Tell us a little bit about what is your inspiration for destination or home in your current works that you're working on.
Yes. So My all of this fiction that is planned to be set in the Southeast.
Okay.
So, my books that I've sold to my publisher thus far are sold as Southern women's fiction. So, they will all have that kind of Southern home component to it that will hopefully take different shapes. So, this one was set in a small town in Georgia. Southern by Design, my first book was set in Charleston. Pretty as a Peach, which is my next book, this one that will come out in July, is set in a small suburban town, or not small, a suburban town outside of Atlanta. Strangely like the place that I live right now, not that it's based on it.
Yeah.
So that there's a lot of Southern culture woven into that as well. And then the book that I'm writing right now, which will end up being my 2027 book, is set it back in the Low Country, South Carolina. So
Wonderful.
yes, so all of these books will have kind of Southern home backdrops and all of those kind of rich cultural things that go along with Southern culture, family relationships, tradition, not going along with tradition, bucking the system, all those types of things. It's funny that you're talking about the Low Country just a moment ago because I literally this morning, just before got on with y'all, I was writing my next book and I just was getting to describe this, kind of estuary, marshy area, and I was just like, oh, it feels so good to be back, that these areas that we long for. And I think that setting for me as a reader has always been, like you described, a beautiful way to escape to somewhere that I'm not. And for me as a reader, I have always used fiction as an escape. So for me, we all read with different lenses and with different motivations. And for some people, they want to be scared. And for some people, they want to be, either heart pattering with romance. And for me, I really want to escape into someone else's world and just kind of take a break from my regular life for a while. And so kind of charming settings have always done that for me. So I think that kind of slips into my writing as well.
That's so exciting. So maybe we can feature you for a few more books, eh?
I would love to. I would love to come back.
Um, I wanted to ask because when we first met, we had a little bit of scheduling issues just because the book had not come out yet, and it came out in October, correct?
November, the
November.
close. Yeah.
Okay. And how is everything going? How are your sales? Is your publisher, your agent, how all that kind of stuff? Is everybody happy? I mean, I hope so.
Yeah, so everything's going well. Surprisingly, authors don't have a ton of insight into kind of day by day. I think there's if you're an independent author that's selling, through Amazon, you have a lot more kind of line of sight onto kind of what's happening in real time. For me, it's more of like periodically we get check-ins. And so yeah, I mean things are going really well. I've had the opportunity to do some really fun events. I My book tour was cut a little bit short because my children got the flu. I know it's one of those things where it's like I've never seen my son so sick, but fortunately everybody was fine, but we just had to be home for a while. And I'm having a great time doing, meeting with book clubs and talking more about the book. So and readers have been really warm and generous and have, embraced it and sharing online. And so I feel very fortunate.
Good. Congratulations.
Thank
Congratulations.
you.
Go girl, Francine.
Okay, d one thing I want to say about your writing is, and I'm not going to compare you to anybody that's alive because there's a lot. Southern women's fiction is my favorite genre,
Me
but
too.
you're very much like Dorothea Benton Frank, and I read every book she ever wrote. And so it excites me to know that you have more of these books coming out. I mean, I like a good mystery. I do like memoirs. I'm crazy about memoirs, but Grace, just keep coming, keep coming. Okay, so
That is the biggest compliment you could ever give because she was my inspiration from the
she
get-go.
was.
Yeah, so her books, I found her books shortly after I had my son. And so I had just kind of come out of this postpartum haze and finally to the point where I could, while I was awake, I could read something for more than, 5 seconds without falling asleep. And I found her books, and like we were talking about earlier, they just transported me somewhere
Yeah.
completely different. And I just escaped with those characters. And so when I kind of thought about trying my hand at writing a book a year or so later, I she was my inspiration, and I was like, I want to do Southern women's fiction. I love Southern women's fiction, just like you said, my favorite genre too. And so I appreciate that compliment because that's probably the biggest compliment you could give me.
Well, when I read her years ago, she made me fall in love with Charleston, South Carolina, and Sullivan's Island before I ever visited the place. Like I said, I have to, and so I can't wait to go. So anyway, I'm glad we agree on that. So
Yeah.
did you know how this book? Not that we're giving any spoilers because we're not, but did you know the ending of this book before you wrote it, or how did that come about?
No, and I'm so glad you asked me that because I don't know that anybody else has asked me that yet before. And maybe because I've talked to a lot of people in a context of who maybe hadn't read the book.
Eh,
But no, I did not know how the book was going to end. In
oh,
fact, there were some big changes that happened during edits that just kind of fundamentally changed the ending of the
okay,
book.
okay,
And that was something even in my early drafts that I kind of wrestled with. How do I want things to go? And how do I want things to go versus what's the right thing for the story? And what's the right thing for these characters and what is the story asking for versus what do I feel like doing? And I think that was kind of a really big editorial growing point for me too. It was my first experience of kind of looking at something and saying, stepping back from it and saying, I think my editor's right about, this big change. And I think that the book is asking for this.
uh-huh.
This works for the book, even if this is not, you know, what I first had in mind. So I think I'll say that without saying too much and
Right.
spoiling.
Yeah. I'm not saying anything else either. Everybody has to read it, and then they'll
Yes.
figure out what we're talking about.
Yes.
Please.
One of the things that I love about authors when you put in discussion questions in the back of the book, because sometimes I think we get into the habit of asking the same questions over and over again and may not get the actual, some good story out of you, the author. So the one that I wanted to bring up, because we can talk about themes without a spoiler, is one theme in the story is being honest and telling the truth. That will lead someone to freedom and peace. Is there a time in your own life that you saw this play out, where you had to just go ahead and tell this is a truth about the South, isn't it not? Because our heritage, our culture is to make everything great. Everything's fine. How's the family? Great, fine. And I found actually when I moved away from Georgia and into Colorado, I was shocked that not everyone was always saying that. So, tell us a little bit about the juxtaposition or the story of trying to tell the truth about something that really does set you free instead of sugarcoating it, or
Yeah.
where that came from you or the book.
Yeah. So I think it started with me and then I kind of pushed that question into the book and then the characters lived it out. But I think for me as a person, Susie, exactly what you just described is my experience too, where I think especially as women, my experience as a woman being raised, and this isn't necessarily the commentary on my family specifically, so much as to just the larger culture. I think there's a lot of expectation put on young women to be nice, to be sweet, to be likable, and to be all of these things that are about how other people perceive you. And so I think a lot of my kind of growing up in terms of like my adult growing up, I hope I'm always constantly growing, but has been about how much of the truth can I tell, right? Without kind of breaking this social contract. And is this a social contract I want to uphold? And I've been a part of this women's group at my church, and this is not religious, so it's just the context is a church. Um, and there's a woman who's older than me, and one day she's what was one of our leaders, and one day she said something about I'm working on being less agreeable, was what she said. And it was in the context, I loved it. I loved it, Francine. It was in the context of I'm not just going to go along with something because it makes other people feel comfortable, right? I'm not going to, you know, quiet my own voice because don't want to upset somebody else. And so I think, um, that's a whole conversation we could have for, hours on end itself of kind of where do how do you effectively speak up for yourself and be honest? Because for me, I joke around with my husband a lot that, he is like, you're so hard, you're so tough. Like, like you'll say it how it is. And I was telling him, I respect you. I'm not going to pull punches or I'm not going to, mince words, whatever the phrase is. Because I am a person that is motivated by honesty, but I also find in my closest relationships, is where I can be most honest. And I find myself also having those compulsions to say, if I love someone, I don't always want to be honest. My husband is different because he's like my closest person. And I'm like, you can take it. And I'm going to be honest with you in a respectful way, obviously. Um, but with my friends about, when I think about certain things, I'm like, well, am I honest with you about this? Is it going to hurt your feelings? Like how do we toe that line? And so for me, that's something I'm very just aware of as I move through life, not necessarily that there's one kind of big experience of that, more so as it's just a concept that I'm very aware of, because I aspire to be somebody who is honest in a way that's loving. But I also think there are times where you don't need to be honest about stuff. Like I have an 8-year-old and a 6-year-old, and we're talking about like, well, what kind of appropriate or what are appropriate things to say? And it's like, okay, well, if your friend shows you a piece of artwork and you don't really care for it, like, do you need to say, oh, I don't like it? No, if you don't care for something like that, you can just say nothing, or you can say, thank you for showing it to me, or these are ways you can handle it. But without getting too far off on a tangent, I think about those concepts a lot. And so I think that a lot of that ended up in the book as well.
Mhm. Perfect. Especially among sisters and friends, and that people know different friends. Just the dynamic of being in a small town, and everybody does know each other's business, and what is going to be shared and what's not going to be shared.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and I think too, in the sense of like when you see your sister or your friend, somebody that's important to you doing something that is going to lead down the wrong path, how do you gently navigate that with them? And at what times is it just their life to choose what they want to do? And at what point is it your place to say something?
right, right. Francine, go for it, lady.
That's a tough call.
I
Yeah.
know.
Sometimes I've voiced my opinion and it wasn't welcome, So but as I've gotten older, I've learned to also keep my mouth shut unless someone specifically says, "What is your opinion?"
Mhm.
That kind of thing. So, yeah, it's very hard. And, you know, trying to please everybody but yourself is not healthy. We all know that. And as you mature and grow, you realize you have to make yourself happy first before you're going to make anybody else happy.
Right. And that's one of the big lessons that Georgia is working on in the book is that
Yeah,
she wants to make everybody else happy. And she's kind of saying, instead of my own happiness.
right. And I get that. I mean, I did that for a lot of years until I did a lot of self-help, and that's a money's well spent. But what is your writing process? Do you write from the beginning to the end, or do you just start with an idea and then work all over?
Yeah, so I'm definitely on the plotter end of the spectrum. I love that people can, just start and get through it. I can't imagine myself ever being able to do that. So I really start with a concept of place and characters and what do I want the central conflict to be. And then I really like to build out the plot. I'm not meticulous in my plotting. There are some people that will do 30-page outlines or, really intense stuff like that. I like to have the main kind of beats of the story mapped out. have my character, the kind of core concepts of who my characters are and what they're trying to achieve defined. And then there I start writing and I write quickly. So when I do a first draft, my goal is to just write the draft, and to kind of get through as many of the plot points as I can. And that's the thing, when I do plan, everything is still negotiable. So, if I put something in the plan and I'm like, this isn't working, I go in and it's not working. I have no qualms throwing it out. So just because something makes it into a plan doesn't necessarily mean it's going to make it beyond that point. And then from there, I'll go back and revise and revise and revise. But I definitely am methodical with it. And I'm, also just the nature of my lifestyle is that, I have certain hours where I can write. And
Mhm.
in fact, that's helpful because I've found that the more time I have, like if I have a day where I'm like, oh, wow, grandma and grandpa are going to take the kids or whatever, and I've got from, 9 to 5 or whatever, then suddenly I'm like, okay, well, then in that case, I can add, this, and this to my schedule. And, so and so, oh, I need to catch up with so and so. So I'm like on email. And when I have short windows of time, I can really focus in and get, a lot of words out that there's almost this urgency of like, if I don't use this time now, there's not going to be any more later. So I'm just kind of by default, I'm pretty structured and routine when it comes to the writing process.
That's good. Be on a plan.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you write through word processing on a computer or do you write longhand?
Yeah, on a computer. I use Scrivener, which I love. I don't use even half of the features. I'm not that tech savvy. But I like how I can move text around and I can write in an outline. Because then when I'm revising, I find it's really easy to go back, and locate sections of the text. When I get to line edits, I have to work in a Word document and I hate it. I hate it so much because I'm like trying to scroll through and find stuff and I'm like, what chapter was that? And then I can't remember. Whereas in my Scrivener, I've got all the chapters labeled with like the bullet point of, this is the event, like the main event of each, scene. So I
Mhm.
can just scan down the list and go straight to it. So usually a lot of times I'll do side by side on my screen actually, and I'll use Scrivener to as kind of like my table of contents to of like, these are the chapter numbers versus the events that are happening in them, and go back. But I think a lot of people will use Google Docs too. I think that's better than Word, but some people write their entire book in Word and I don't know how they do it, but
Yeah.
all different strokes for different folks.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really cool that there's so many good products out there where people can dictate stories and it turn into a transcript or what have you. Do you have any anticipation to ever have anything turn into a screenplay that you've written? And if so, who would Georgia be, the actress?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I don't have any, unfortunately, there's no like plans in the works to have anything go to screen. I think it's, typically it's few and far between with how many books actually make it to a screen production. So it's so exciting when you do get to see, like Emily Henry's book, Just People We Meet on Vacation, just came out on
It's
Netflix.
fantastic. Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
so good.
I haven't watched the movie yet, but I really enjoyed the book. So it's always exciting when you see that come to life. But so Georgia, and here's my thing, it's funny. I always write the discussion questions about like the movie, who would act out, who'd be the actor for this. But I am personally terrible with celebrity names.
Yeah.
I can envision someone's face but it's so funny because if I meet someone in person and I have a personal conversation with them, I am very likely to remember their name. I'm not somebody that just forgets names, but when it comes to celebrities, I'm like celebrity blind. So I think the person I'm thinking of is Julianne Moore. Is she like red hair, very
Mhm.
like creamy, like complexion? I don't know.
Yeah.
That's who I would pick, I think, for Georgia. But
Mhm.
she would have to be less sleek in terms of
Be
like
more
hair and
ruffled.
makeup. Yeah, she usually
Yeah.
looks very like Hollywood glam, I think.
Yeah.
At least but that's who I would pick for. And then Junie, I had thought about Amy Adams because when I do these questions, I'm like, oh, who would I pick? So
Mhm.
for Junie, I would pick Amy Adams, but then beyond that, I'm not sure. Um, I'm not sure. I would have to like go through like a list of celebrities, like with their,
Photos,
yes,
headshot.
exactly. Yeah, headshot. Yep.
You'd have a lineup. Well, our 30 minute or we're at 40 minutes already,
Oh, goodness.
has flown by so much. There's a question that we always ask our authors just because it helps inspire us for those that can read more than one book a month. Francine, you want to ask that question we always ask about bedside tables?
Oh, yes. Grace, what do you like to read when you're not writing and you have like some time on your hands? What are you reading?
Yes. So, well, I do read a lot of Southern women's fiction, so that's kind, I love it, and
Mhm.
I also love to stay up on what are other people writing about. But I've recently gotten really into a magical realism kick. So I've read, if you have read any Jennifer Mormon, she just came out with The Charmed Library, which I loved. That's a book about a woman who works in a library, and she discovers that she has the power to bring characters to life from
Mhm.
books. And I think on the back cover it says like it's hallmarky is a word they use to describe it. So it's cozy and sweet. And also just exciting and magical and fun. I also really enjoyed Elizabeth Bass Parman's Bees in June.
Yes.
Yes, so especially if you're a Southern fiction,
Oh.
women's fiction fan, that is a historic. It's set on the backdrop of the moon landing.
Mhm.
But that one I highly recommend that if you like Southern women's fiction. And Elizabeth has another book out too that you can check out if you're interested. And then Heather Weber's books I've just discovered as well. So she writes. So I read I don't know if it was her debut, but it was one of her books that was um, Black Midnight at the Blackbird Cafe. So that's another
Oh,
one
okay.
where it's so funny. My memory I lose details so quickly. Like I could watch a movie and 2 weeks later, someone asked me, "What's the premise?" And I'm like, "I don't know, but I liked it." So I don't have character names or any of that for you, but essentially the main character goes back to a small town in Alabama to her grandmother's cafe where there's this famous pie, blackberry pie maybe. And it has this magical capability for like dreams. And so there's an issue with the pie. And so she's trying to, so if you like magical realism, and she has tons of other books as well. So that's kind of what I'm reading right now. That's my current catnip. I also love mysteries. I read thrillers too. I dabble in romance. Those are my main genres.
Memoirs. Did you read any memoirs?
Sometimes I do. My problem is I read as much as I can. If I could have an extra day in the week just for only reading where I could just sit
Mhm.
in a chair,
Yeah.
then I would mix in more probably. Um, but I don't probably do as much memoir as I should. I've heard many really good ones have come out though.
Right. I found a solution to that. I have a physical book going all the time and an audio book going all the time.
Yeah.
I love audiobooks, obsessed with them. So
But is it a different book or the same book?
no, it's a different book. It's so historical fiction, memoirs. I do mostly audiobooks,
Mhm.
but like a Grace book or Christy Woodson Harvey book, I read Jennifer's book. I got to read that early. I like those in a physical book. Those are I want to touch it.
Right,
Yeah.
right. That's something that I always, it's interesting. I always talk to people when I'm like, do you read? And they're like, yeah, but I'm always on my Kindle or whatever. I just love holding the
Me too.
tactile hold of a book. And I think that, I've found that as I'm aging, in order to keep my attention, what is helpful, this sounds very elementary, but it's to, if there is an audible version of the book, I will put it on like not 1.5, but maybe 1.2 to try to keep going. Because sometimes Audible's a little too slow, but I like reading the book and listening out loud or in my
Oh,
earbuds at the same
yeah.
time, because then I'm getting kind of the audio-ness of it. I still can imagine what's happening with my own mind. And then I'm still, of course, getting the words processed through my brain. I think that's the most important thing to do is to actually reprint and process the words and grow our vocabulary still. Do you find that you have a preference, Grace, in the way you read a book?
Yes, so I am right there with you. My preference is a physical book. And
Mhm.
I agree. I think there's something about physically holding it that holds me in the moment. I wish I was better with audio, even
Mhm.
with podcasts, because I've kind of come and gone with podcasts, but with audiobooks, I find my mind wandering. And my mom tells me she's like, it's because you're a mother of young children. Like you're constantly like, there's this to-do
Yes.
list that's
Yeah.
current, like constantly refreshing with what's for dinner, who's where, who needs to be picked up, where's the laundry, all these things that um, I find my attention is just not good with audio. I think I'll come back. I'm hoping that late because my mom has said the same thing that she enjoys audiobooks now. Yes, so the hard copy book is it for me. I will do more e-reader than I used to, but that's mostly because of logistics. If I'm offered to read a book early, a lot of times it's versions that are available first. But my first choice is always a physical book for me.
Yay.
Me too. I've already picked out the two I'm taking California with me. Like
Oh,
I
great.
want to, I always want a special book for the flight over. And then once I get there, I want another one and then one for coming back.
Well, that's great.
Yeah.
Good for you. Good for you. Well, Grace, I wanted to thank you so much for letting us feature you in in this virtual book club and for meeting with us on Zoom. And I will be uploading this to our group and also onto YouTube later today. And maybe that'll circle some more folks back to picking up the copy of the book. And I would love to have you back after you pass out or pass out. That sounds like you're passing out papers in a classroom. Once you publish Pretty as a Peach. I love the title. It's very Southern, right? Very
Yeah.
Hold,
Georgian.
And
hold it up again so we can see it.
oh, yeah. This is
Isn't it pretty?
It
It's
I
is
so
love
pretty.
beautiful.
it. I'm so excited. The cover is just everything I wanted. But yes, thank you both for having me. I appreciate y'all taking the time out, Susie and Francine. Thank you for talking about Good Hair Days, and I would love to come back this summer. Yeah.
Oh, good. And
That
you
would be
always
great.
have an invite to come to Richmond for a book party too. If you can ever get up here, we can.
I'm definitely going to keep that in my back pocket. I would love to make it work at some point.
It doesn't have to be in the middle of your, but like later on. My friends will come for any book party.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
great. That's great. Well, I'm going to push end all and then we'll just poof away from being together. So thank you so much, Grace. And thank you,
Thank
Francine,
you.
again.
Thank you, Susie.
Everybody have a wonderful week and keep on reading something cozy, something that makes you feel good, escape what's maybe going on in the real walls of the United States. But
Yeah.
just enjoy a good book, y'all. Take care. Thanks a
Thank
lot,
you.
everybody.
Thanks,
Bye.
Susie. Thanks, Grace.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye.